Natasha. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for having me virtually to Westminster. I really enjoyed my visit the other night with the class. Tonight is a reading. You may hear a little twittering in the background. I have a bird. She's usually not awake at this hour, but she's puzzled about what I'm doing. I'm on the East Coast. Thank you for coming tonight, all of you. I'm going to open with the poem that opens the book, In the Lateness of the World. And it was written for an Irish musician. I told this story a little bit the other night. He would pick up a small stone from the ground and everywhere he went on his travels. And he created a whole museum on a wall with all of these stones mounted and labeled. And the stones acquired a kind of significance, even though they were quite ordinary. The museum was very beautiful. So this is my tribute to that museum and to his stones. But of course, as with all poems, it becomes about something else as well. Museum of Stones. These are your stones, assembled in matchbox and tin, collected from roadside, culvert, and viaduct, battlefield, threshing floor, basilica, abattoir. Stones loosened by tanks in the streets, from a city whose earliest map was drawn in ink on linen. Schoolyard stones in the hand of a corpse. Pebble from Baudelaire's Oui. Stone of the mind within us, carried from one silence to another. Stone of cromlech and cairn, schist and shale, hornblende, agate, marble. Millstones, ruins of choirs and shipyards, chalk, marl, mudstone from temples and tombs. Stone from the silvery grass near the scaffold. Stone from the tunnel lined with bones. Lava of a city's entombment. Stones chipped from lighthouse, cell wall, scriptorium. Paving stones from the hands of those who rose against the army. Stones where the bells had fallen, where the bridges were blown. Those that had flown through windows, weighted petitions, feldspar, rose quartz, blue schist, gneiss, and chert. Fragments of an abbey at dusk. Sandstone toe of a Buddha, mortared at Bamiyan. Stone from the hill of 3 crosses and a crypt. From a chimney where storks cry like human children. Stones newly fallen from stars. A stillness of stones, a heart. Altar and boundary stone, marker and vessel. First cast, load and hail. Bridge stones and others to pave and shut up with. Stone apple, stone basil, beech berry, stone break. Concretion of the body, as blind, as cold, as deaf. All earth a quarry, all life a labor. Stone-faced, stone drunk with hope, that this assemblage of rubble taken together would become a shrine or holy place, an ossuary, immovable and sacred, like the stone that marked the path of the sun as it entered the human dawn. For the past, before COVID, and for about 7 summers, I taught on an island in the northern Aegean in Greece. It was very close to Lesbos. This island was Thassos, and Lesbos was the island where the refugee camps were set up. And for several years, several summers, people were crossing, they still are, the Aegean and the Mediterranean, fleeing the wars, fleeing conflict, fleeing disruption and poverty and displacement, refugees. And they often cross in fragile boats or in rubber zodiacs, and many of them sink, and many lives are lost in the water. Some of them make it. And one winter, I was teaching at the University of Marquette in Milwaukee, and it was very cold that winter. I was only there for a semester. And so some days I was too cold for me to walk to campus. I lived in a hotel downtown, and so I would try to get a cab. And there were many cabs because it was a hotel area, but this one driver always seemed to pick me up, or often did, so much so that we recognized each other after a while. And we talked. Sometimes we began talking. And one day, it was snowing hard. I asked him where he was from, and he looked at me in the rearview mirror. And he said, "I'm from Homs in Syria." Somehow we started talking about how he got to Milwaukee, and the snow fell and buried the taxi cab. He turned the meter off and he said, "I'll tell you this, but only if you write about it someday." And I explained to him that poets can't really choose what they write about. And I would try, but I wasn't sure whether it would happen. And fortunately, it did. The Boatman. "We were 31 souls," he said, "in the gray sick of sea, in a cold rubber boat, rising and falling in our filth. By morning, this didn't matter. No land was in sight. All were soaked to the bone, living and dead. We could still float," we said, "from war to war. What lay behind us but ruins of stone piled on ruins of stone? City called Mother of the Poor, surrounded by fields of cotton and millet. City of jewelers and cloak makers, with the oldest church in Christendom and the sword of Allah. If anyone remains there now, they would be utterly alone. There is a hotel named for it in Rome, 200 meters from the Piazza di Spagna, where you can have breakfast under the portraits of film stars. There, the staff cannot do enough for you. But I am talking nonsense again, as I have since that night we fetched a child, not ours, from the sea, drifting face down in a life vest, its eyes taken by fish or the birds above us. After that, Aleppo went up in smoke, and Raqqa came under a rain of leaflets warning everyone to go. Leave, yes, but go where? We lived through the Americans and Russians, through Americans again, many nights of death from the clouds, mornings surprised to be waking from the sleep of death, still unburied and alive, with no safe place. Leave, yes, we'll obey the leaflets, but go where? To the sea to be eaten? To the shores of Europe to be caged? To Camp Misery and Camp Remain here? I ask you then, where? You tell me you are a poet. If so, our destination is the same. I find myself now the boatman, driving a taxi at the end of the world. I will see that you arrive safely, my friend. I will get you there. I lost his card. I was never able to send him the poem. I hope he somehow sees it someday. Or maybe I could just go back to Milwaukee and start hailing taxi cabs. This next poem is about the same friend who I wrote the Museum of Stones for. He's dead now. We both were having chemotherapy at the same time, and he didn't make it. But when he was still alive, he found out that I loved lighthouses, and I had gone to Ireland, and he was Irish, and he took me to a magnificent lighthouse, but he made me go in the middle of the night because that's when lighthouses are really alive. And this one was called Hook Lighthouse, and it was across the water from the Crook Lighthouse, which might be where we get that expression. But this light keeper poem is called The Light Keeper. It has in it the history of how lighthouses were lit. But as with everything else, it becomes about something else too. The Light Keeper, a night without ships, foghorns calling into walled cloud, and you still alive, drawn to the light as if it were a fire kept by monks. Darkness once crusted with stars, but now death dark as you sail inward. Through wild gorse and sea wrack, through heather and torn wool, you ran, pulling me by the hand so I might see this for once in my life. The spin and spin of light, the whirring of it. Light in search of the lost, there since the era of fire, era of candles and hollow wick lamps, whale oil and solid wick, colza and lard, kerosene and carbide. The signal fires lighted on this perilous coast in the Tower of Hook. You say to me, stay awake. Be like the lens maker who died with his lungs full of glass. Be the yew in blossom when bees swarm. Be their amber cathedral, and even the ghosts of Cistercians will be kind to you. In a certain light, as after rain, in pearled clouds, or the water beyond, seen or sensed water, sea or lake, you would stop still and gaze out for a long time. Also, when fireflies opened and closed in the pines and a star appeared, our only heaven, you taught me to live like this, that after death it would be as it was before we were born. Nothing to be afraid, nothing but happiness, as unbearable as the dread from which it comes. Go toward the light always. Be without ships. I'm very close to a poet, Ilya Kaminsky. I was his teacher for quite a few years, and then his friend, and then he was my teacher. And well, we traveled together back to Ukraine, where he grew up we traveled there in 2004. It was late winter, and I thought it would be a good idea for him to go and see Odessa again, his city. And it was, in a way, a good idea, but it was also probably not so good an idea. It's very hard if you are in exile to return. I'm reading this for him tonight because Ukraine, Odessa are very much in our thoughts. We visited also Sarskia Selo, which is the summer houses of the czars in Russia. And it's where Anna Akhmatova spent her girlhood summers and where Pushkin went to school. And Ilya was very keen to visit the shrines of the silver poets, the poets of the Silver Age in Russia. So we made that trip too. And this is the poem that came of that journey. For Ilya at Tsarskoye Selo. We stand in the casement window of Pushkin's lycée. These are the desks where Pushkin wrote, his chalkboards, his astrolabe. Snow falls from here into the past and vanishes on golden minarets. Snow recedes from the birches. A lesson writes itself in winter chalk. On the day Michelangelo died in Rome, Galileo was born in Pisa. Isaac Newton was born the year Galileo died. When they searched for the poet Kabir, they found nothing beneath his shroud but a sprig of jasmine. Man is like the statue, whispering about the marble chiseled from his mouth. You are the guardian of this statue, standing in your silent world. The year Isaac Newton died, there was a barn fire during a puppet show. Kabir says, all corpses go to the same place, and the world has fallen in love with a dream. This life is not the same as your other life. We are here now in one of the shrines of the silver poets. You are one of the silver. The snow is a white peacock in a Russian poem. The other night, someone asked me about the poem, The Lost Suitcase, which I wrote for another poet now gone named Daniel Simcoe. You should find his book called The Arrival by Daniel Simcoe. We traveled together back to Czechoslovakia. Our families were both from the same village in the Tatra Mountains, and we wanted to go back after the Velvet Revolution so that he could get the things he left behind when he fled Czechoslovakia in 1968. Jazz records, his books, and I wanted to find my family who were living in Brno. And at the beginning of that journey, one of his suitcases was stolen. The lost suitcase. So it was with the suitcase left in front of the hotel, cinched, broken locked, papered with world ports, carrying what mattered until then. When turning your back to cup a match, it was taken. And the thief, expecting valuables, instead found books written between wars, gold attic light, mechanical birds singing, and the chronicle of your country's final hours. What, by means of notes, you hoped to become. A noun on paper, paper dark with nouns. Swallows darting through a basilica, your hands up in smoke. A cloud about to open over the city. Pillows breathing shallowly where you had lain. A ghost in a hospital gown. And here, your voice, principled, tender, soughing through a fence woven with pine boughs. Writing is older than glass, but younger than music, older than clocks or porcelain but younger than rope. Dear one, who even in speaking is silent, for years I have searched, usually while asleep. When I have found the suitcase, open, collecting snow, still holding your vade-mecum of the infinite, your dictionary of the no longer spoken, a commonplace of wounds casually inflicted, and the slender ledger of truly heroic acts. Gone is your atlas of countries unmarked by war. Absent, your manual for the preservation of ours. The incunabulum is lost, both your earliest book and a hatching place for your mechanical birds, but the collection of aperçus having to do with light laying its eggs in your eyes was found, along with the prophecy that all mass murders were early omens. In an antique bookshop, I found your catechism of atrophied faiths. So I lay you to rest without your psalter, nor the monograph wherein you state your most unequivocal and hard-won proposition, that everything must happen, but to whom doesn't matter. Here are your books, as if they were burning. Be near now and wake to tell me who you were. I know I'm moving around the world a lot, but this book moves a bit around the world. It was written over a period of 17 years. A lot of countries were involved. One of them was Vietnam. I went to Vietnam several times in the company of soldiers who had fought there. And we were visiting soldiers who fought them on the other side. These soldiers were all translating each other now from English into Vietnamese and Vietnamese into English. They were all poets. And this is a poem that came from one of those trips. Hue, from a notebook. We went down the Perfume River by dragon boat, as far as the pagoda of the 3 golden Buddhas. Pray here. You can ask for happiness. We light joss sticks, send votives downriver in paper sacks, then have trouble disembarking from the boat. Our bodies disembark. Our souls remain. 1,000 lanterns drift. A notebook opens in the dark to a page where moonlight makes a sound. These soldiers are decades from war now, pewter-haired, steel-haired, a moon caught in plumeria. We are like clouds that pass and pass. What does it matter if we are not the same as clouds? There was then the whir of stork wings and bicycle chains ringing. It is still now, the way the air is still, just before the mine explodes. Once we fired at each other. Now we pass silence back and forth. On the 10,000 graves, we lay chrysanthemum. This is a poem about an island off the coast of Seattle. Mourning on the island. The lights across the water are the waking city. The water shimmers with imaginary fish. Not far from here lie the bones of conifers washed from the sea and piled by wind. Some mornings I walk upon them, bone to bone, as far as the lighthouse. A strange beetle has eaten most of the trees. It may have come here on the ships, playing music in the harbor, or it was always here, a winged jewel, but in the past was kept still by the cold of a winter that no longer comes. There is an owl living in the firs behind us, but he is white, meant to be mistaken for snow, burdening a bough. They say he is the only owl remaining. I hear him at night, listening for the last of the mice and asking who of no other owl. So I'm going to close with I don't know. I think I will close with the poem that closes the book, which is called What Comes. And it's a poem I wrote to myself when I was in chemo. And it was a poem to talk myself into being okay, I think. This is one poem I really didn't know where it came from because it doesn't really come from a memory the way that a lot of my poems do, many of them. This is What Comes, and it begins for some reason with an epigraph by the poet Juan E. I brought from despair a basket so light, my love, that it might have been woven of willows. To speak is not yet to have spoken, the not yet of a white realm of nothing left, neither for itself nor another, a no longer already there, along with the arrival of what has been, light and the reverse of light, terror as walking blind along the breaking sea, body in whom I lived, the not yet of death, darkening what it briefly illuminates, an unknown place, as between languages, back and forth, breath to breath, as a calm in the surround rises, fireflies in lindens, an ache of pine. You have yourself within you, yourself. You have her, and there is nothing that cannot be seen. Open then to the coming of what comes. Okay, thank you. And I'm happy to answer questions for a little while.
Thank you, Carolyn. It was wonderful to hear those.
Thank you.
So
we have a question from Mystery Post.
Okay, a Westminster grad. Go ahead, Mystery. You can unmute yourself and just ask it.
Or maybe it wasn't a question, maybe.
No worries. Yeah, I did want to ask, as someone who's always curious about how poetry collections come together, how did you go about kind of designing this collection in particular? Did you already have an idea in mind when you started, or did it kind of come together as it worked?
I never have ideas before individual poems or before collections. They kind of evolve. This one was just composed of the poems I selected from the poems that I wrote during a 17-year period. There's a lot of reasons why it took that long. I usually take about 10 years, but this was longer. And how I chose them was that these were the ones that I felt I could publish because they had achieved something, or they had surprised me, or they had gone in a direction I didn't anticipate. So I trusted them to be real poems, you know. I trusted that they were ready to be read by others. And so what I did was I kind of tried to arrange them because I noticed they were in conversation with each other. A lot of the images recur. There's a lot of water, there are boats, there are bridges, there are birds, there's things that move and leap from poem to poem. And so I put them in conversation with each other for the arrangement. And they got delayed because the publisher wanted to publish my memoir first. And it took me several more years to finish the memoir. So the poetry book kind of had to wait in the drawer. And while it was waiting, I wrote 5 more poems that found their way into this book. So it was good that the book waited because the 5 more poems could arrive that way. Yeah. So I'm not saying you shouldn't plan a book, but I don't. And I never have. So it's not something I advocate. I sort of advocate being a little bit loose about these matters and seeing what happens, what comes, what emerges on the page. Sam Schwager? Sam?
Go ahead, Sam Schwagerbach. You can unmute yourself, or if you prefer, you can write the question in the chat and I'll read it.
Hi, I apologize for any background noise. My question is just regarding to all of the places you've been, all the things you must have seen. What is art to you? And about the art you do, your poetry, what would you say you write for?
What do I write for?
Yeah, is there a specific reason, such as like self-expression, or is there something you're trying to achieve?
Well, I started when I was 9 and I just enjoyed it. I loved writing. I loved writing poems and stories and all sorts of things. And I just kept going all through my childhood and adolescence. And then in college, I was able to develop it a little bit because there were already back then creative writing classes. And I read a lot as a kid too. So I knew that literature was something. And I knew that poetry was something and had been written for thousands of years. And so I written and invented in the mouth orally for thousands of years. So I never thought about what it was for. I did it because I had to and because I needed to write, that's all. And I would write no matter what. If there were no more publishers, if books were no more, if no one read anymore, I would still write. I wrote before I had any readers, if you know what I mean. So what do I think it's for? I think it's a way of retrieving something from the human consciousness that can't be retrieved any other way. It's a way of learning something, of speaking something about consciousness and the world in a compressed, musical, deep way. And so I think it's important. And I know from before COVID that people who come to poetry readings are often very moved by that experience. And people who enjoy reading poetry really enjoy it. And their houses fill up with poetry books, and their shelves fill up with poetry books until they have no more walls to put the shelves against. So for me, it's enough just for itself. But through my poems, a lot of things have surfaced, have come up from things that I've seen and felt and experienced. And because my life has been rather unusual for an American, that experience has reflected a reality that it isn't always reflected in our poetry. And I just had to allow it to happen, because if you get in the way of poems, it's a terrible thing. So I didn't ever think I was becoming a political poet or any other kind of poet. You know, I didn't think about that so much. Is there any other?
Okay,
Is
we
that-
have time, yeah, for one more question, maybe?
I thank you, very attentive. It's a very, I mean, I don't know, I can't see you. I see little
Little
boxes.
black boxes. Yeah, I'm looking, I'm
Georgiana.
scrolling through.
I see Maria and Georgiana. I'll try to do both of them. Maria?
Yeah.
My question was just clearly a lot of your poems are based on experiences and travel, but how much do you allow imaginary things to make their way into your poems?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't think I imagine, I let everything that comes in, but I usually know where the images occurred to me, or I know where I saw them. They are actually from sensory experience. They are from little notebooks. And sometimes they just come to me while during the day, I just write them in the little notebooks. I don't have the sensation of imagining. I have the sensation of remembering or experiencing or finding an unusual image floating by. You know, I don't always know what everything means and how everything fits together, but my poems are not fictions. And I'm not saying it's bad to write fictional poetry. I just don't. I was going to try fiction, you know, prose fiction, just to see if I could do that. I did try prose nonfiction. Poets are pretty drawn to prose nonfiction. They like personal essays and things, personal narratives. Lots of poets write memoirs, but I was wondering whether it was possible to enter fully into the realm of imagination, you know, and make something out of nothing. Maybe. I don't know if I have that ability. I wrote short stories when I was young, but I haven't in years written short stories. And Georgiana?
Carolyn, I wanted to say hello to you because I was here teaching at Westminster when you first visited
Yeah.
the college. It has been so many years since then. I was telling Natasha and trying to remember the year. But in terms of my question, I love the poem, The Museum of Stones.
Well, thank you.
And I've been working with a medieval poet for quite some time who equates the power, the magical power of words with stones.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed to me that in your litany of stones, there's also a litany, the verbal litany. I wonder if you could make any remarks on words and stones.
I think your friend is probably thinking about the weight that individual words have and their materiality and their signifying power. For me, I've always been interested in rocks and stones and fossils, and because I grew up with little rock collections and things. So it wasn't much of a stretch for me to enter into the world of that museum of stones that he was creating. But there's a lot of symbolic resonance. I mean, rubble is composed of stones. The earth all turns back into rubble. And wars create this rubble, and we make something of the rubble. And I think the poem wanted to go in the direction of the passage tombs of Ireland, which is where it winds up in the end, which are Neolithic tombs built by children. I mean, the life expectancy for humans, they think was about 25 years old then. And these passage tombs are precisely and beautifully dug into the earth. They weren't discovered until airplanes flew over them for the first time during the First World War and saw the round shapes in the fields, and they dug. And they found that these tombs were dug in such a way they were airtight, not a single drop of moisture in, centuries. And the opening was positioned so that precisely at dawn on the solstice, if there were no clouds, the sun would enter and flood the chamber for 17 minutes. And so that is the stone that marks the path of the sun as it enters the human dawn. But I wanted to come to terms with a lot of things in that poem toward the end. But the litanies and catalogs are very much part of this new book. It became song-like in that way, but also an inventory of earth, an inventory of all that we're losing, an inventory of all that we've destroyed, and so on. So, and I think that's why Museum of Stones has to begin the book. I don't know whether I've answered your question or not, but I remember my trip to Westminster that first time, and I think, was I almost bald? Had I had chemo?
I don't remember that. I remember our talking about ice skating and various other things.
Oh, ice skating.
This was so long ago.
Yeah, now we're thinking about ice skating again because of the Olympics. But yeah, I used to be a figure skater when I was a kid, but it was a long time ago. But I'll tell you what, I will look up in my CV and see if I can find out when, and I will let Natasha know, and she can let you know about what year it was. But I remember it. Wasn't it winter time? Well, there was snow on the mountains, that's for sure.
It could have been early in the year too. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to hear you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming.
Yes, Carolyn, thank you so much. That was a great reading. If you'd like, you can unmute yourself so we can clap.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this evening. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. I'm going to go. I have a rather arduous day tomorrow, and it's a little bit late on the East Coast.
Okay.
For
Thank
this old lady. I usually go to bed early now.
No worries. Bye-bye.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.